Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for another exciting episode of the Daz Plus Pro Artist Series. So nice to see you all, Mr. Jeff, Mr. X201. I love the concoctions that you guys are having. This is great. Mr. Dragonade is here. Mr. Brian is here. Miss Julia is here. Penelope Flynn, how you doing? Design Photo, how's it going? Bob Sader, good to see you. And I believe also the Art Makes a Scene is also here, and about 20 odd other people who have dropped by. Bite Factory, for example. Good to see you, my man. Good to see you from Hanover. How exciting. Good to see you. And Heavy Thunderstorms. You know what? We had that. We originally planned to do this stream about 2 weeks ago. And it turns out that we had so much heavy rainfall here in South Florida, and I think on the East Coast, literally everywhere, that it turned out that our internet just kept going in and out. We've got this new internet connection that's really fast, but what happens with it is that as soon as there's one drop of rain, it just goes flaky and it turns itself off. So that's one of those things. Trevor, how's it going? From Swindon, UK, nice to see you. So we postponed it up until now, which means, it's a little bit more dry and hopefully a little bit more stable. So there we go. Thunder already dead-eyed the Euro 24 football. Isn't it crazy? This is climate change. It's climate change hard at work. My friends, today we're going to have a look at an exciting new product that's been released a few weeks ago by HowieFarks and Daz Originals. It's, of course, UltraScenery 2, and it has cool new features. It's compatible with existing UltraScenery 1, some of UltraScenery 1's content, and we're going to have a look at how it all works. But just before we launch into that, I don't know if you've seen it on the Daz website. There's a little banner that popped up there. Let's see if I can find the right icon. Can I? Is this the one? This might be the one. Could be. Yes, look at that. That's the one. So at the top here, you see this little icon that said preview some of the Daz 4.23 features. And I wanted to briefly talk about this because they're kind of cool. And they've introduced this not in the release version of Daz Studio right now, but in the beta version. So just in case you didn't know about it, you can just, in the search here, in the shop search, you can just search for Daz Studio Beta. And then when you navigate there, you will find this product here, the Daz Studio Beta. And it's another product you can purchase. Well, it's free, but you have to sort of purchase it to add it to your account, and then install it with Install Manager, and it installs itself side by side to the release version. So you can have two versions of Daz Studio running, and you can beta test the latest features. And what has happened here, if you wanted to read this article, you head over to Community and Blog, and then over here we see this article, which is exploring the latest features in Daz Studio 4.22.1.161 public build. And what they've done here is that smart content got an upgrade for tags, and this is useful because up until now it was very difficult for us to figure out which products that I've bought have an interactive or 3D printing license. And this is what that aims to alleviate. That's not rolled out in the release version yet. It's a beta feature right now. But I thought I'm going to go and quickly show you how that works before we're going to look into pictures like that. And also, let me know how you've been, because we haven't seen each other for 2 months. So let's launch right into it. I'm launching this build now, 4.22.1.161. Mine says publishing build. Yours will say something like yellow icon, public build. And the way this works is that up here in smart content, you can go and have a look at any of your products. I'm going to go to figures here, and maybe I'll just use the first one here, Pip the Chick. So the idea is you go and right click on this and choose this option here, add license tag. So that isn't so much, and maybe it's a little bit misleading. It doesn't mean you have to add it, but if you click it, it goes and checks the Daz server and has a look at what licenses are associated with this product, and then it'll bring them in. So on every product, you'll have the standard license. So I'm going to go and do that, add that, and goes and talks to the server and comes back. And then it doesn't actually show you on the product. You have to go and click into the product, because a product is just a collection of items you've bought. Like in this case, these little Pip hatchlings here by Silver, they're very cute. So if you click on either of them or on multiple of them, you can go and open that little tab down here. And then you head over to tags, and then you can see that this product has in fact the DZ license standard, and that's the one that this product has. So I don't have a 3D printing license or an interactive license for it, but if I had, then they would show up here. And this is helpful because you can now query your smart content by products that have set license. So if I wanted to see, I haven't retrieved this for every product. I've only retrieved it for a couple of products here. But if I head over to files over here, that shows me all the files. So if I go into figures here and I want to know, show me all the figures for which the smart content knows that a standard license exists. So right now in figures, I'll see basically every single figure that I have on the system. But if I go up here into the search field and I type tag and then a colon, and then I'll say standard and let it work for a little bit, then I can see that only these products are filtered out. And that is because I have retrieved the Genesis 9 Starter Essentials and Pip the Chick with these licenses. So this is what the system currently knows these licenses exist on my system. So I've got nothing else, but that's only because I haven't asked the system to perform that. You could go and select all the products here that you have and just go and have that, do that tag. Let me just go and test this with the Genesis 8 Starter Essentials, which I think I have the interactive license for. So let me just go and do that here on this product. It's kind of a live test. Not tried this before yet, but go right click, say add license tags. So then it goes and asks the server, hey, Jay's got this product in his account, what licenses are in there. So if I go and double click that and pick maybe the Genesis 8 basic female, and under tags down here, I can see that I have indeed the Daz standard license and the interactive license, and I even have the 3D printing license. This is kind of cool. So this now means if I want to bring a product into a 3D environment outside of Daz Studio that I want to, with the intention of distributing it on something like the Steam store or the Epic store, if I wanted to use a particular Daz character and make a game with it so that it becomes a playable character, then I need that interactive license. So I can now go and have a look under files and perhaps under figures, literally any product that you want to query, and type that in again. So you tag colon, and this time I'm going to say interactive and hit nothing because it just goes and figures it out. So I have, the system knows that I have the interactive license for these things, so I can use them. And if I want to use anything else that doesn't have that, I'm going to go on the store and buy them. I hope that makes sense. I thought I wanted to bring this to your attention because it's an exciting new feature. And there's also an option to save these things. So you don't have to type this in all the time. You can go here and save a filter if you wanted to just bring it up with one click. There's a video on the Daz channel by Ty. He's made that in portraits, about 4-minute video, the latest one. Brian, if you could dig that up, that'd be great, and post that for us. He explains to you a little bit more about the ins and outs of that and what you can do with it. But I thought it was quite nice because up until now we didn't have that feature, and you know, now we do, which is kind of cool. So there we go. If you have any questions about that, ask me and we'll see if we can figure it out. It's as new to me as it is to you. I didn't know this was going to happen, but yeah, it's one of those things. We get new features all the time, which is kind of nice. It should be a crime to turn the internet off, Nate. I totally agree. I totally agree. I do have a backup. That's fairly important to have that these days because it's just we need it all the time for literally anything. So there we go. That's the license update in the new beta version of Daz Studio. Let me just have a look and show you what I've been able to make with UltraScenery 2 without knowing much about the product until I started playing with it a few days ago. And that's quite exciting. So I've made this promo here and I'll talk you through, all of these things that I've made here. This is something that looks quite exciting, I have to say, and it didn't really take me that long to do it. If you're familiar with the previous UltraScenery, it was already pretty cool. And if you're familiar with HowieFarks' work, then you know what he's all about: procedural generators and nature. And Howie started, it's not his real name by the way, but Howie started as a Carrara artist, and that's when I first became aware of him some 15 years ago. And I was so excited to see his Carrara scenes, like the Habsburg things. They all came out in Carrara first, and I had this seriously underpowered Sony Vaio laptop with check it out, 512 megabytes of RAM, and that was with the update, and it had a Pentium processor. And when I loaded in one of those scenes and I wanted to render it at 1920 by 1080, I don't remember if it was actually that high or not, but it took me literally 8 hours. Poor laptop wasn't rendering for 8 hours to come out with the scene, and it's crazy. It was all CPU based, and it's just incredible how far we've come. So the way Howie did this back in the days was that he made full use of relatively simple objects with transparency, like leaves, like these singular leaves here, or leaves on a tree, or trees, or grass, bushels, and stuff like that. And then he would go and use what's known as a replicator in Carrara back then, and just make hundreds of instances of that would follow a terrain. And that's the magic behind things like landscape generators and PCGs, procedural content generation bits and pieces. They usually have a flat plane that's a landscape, and you put modifiers on it so that it doesn't look flat, that it, there's some kind of curvature in there. And then you can add all kinds of other things on that. So to generate erosions, or this river here, that's basically a height map. That's like a ditch inside the plane. And then once you have that landscape, you tell a generator, put some grass, put some trees, put some like various types of bits and pieces on there, and then have exclusion zones, inclusion zones, and that is what generates this. And the beauty of it is because it's all governed by a random number generator under the hood. You can influence the placement of what's happening where. Now, this is one. Let me go show you another one. This was another one with figures in, so also quite nice. This was the second choice for this for today's thumbnail. I think we chose the previous one because it's kind of it was just a little bit more impactful. I'm going to discuss how we can do this, but I'm also going to talk to you about how to apply something like this little blur filter on the sides here in Photoshop. So a few post-production techniques that makes these scenes pop out a little bit more. Let me show you another one here. This is one that is an aerial shot. Oh, this is actually a comparison of two things I wanted to bring to your attention. UltraScenery 2 is new and improved because of the way it works with the script. So back in the day of UltraScenery 1, Howie basically recreated the Carrara functionality inside of Daz Studio. And I gotta say, Daz Studio isn't fantastic at this task, but he sort of made it work, and I'm really glad he did, because that means these landscape generators sort of live on. And one of the limitations of UltraScenery 1 was the size and resolution of your landscapes, and that's been improved. So they are now up to 16 times. They have up to 16 times more resolution than they did before. This is an aerial shot. These take a long time to render because there's no way to avoid having to display all these instances here. And this was rendered with the regular resolution that you could do with UltraScenery 1. And if you look closely, you can see these sort of edges here, and that is where the landscape geometry just doesn't have enough polygons to resolve that. Like here you have these very visible edges here. So that's literally down to the geometry. But I've re-rendered it with a much higher resolution, and the distribution of the trees and the features here is different, because at that point when you change the resolution, or when you do something, the placement of these trees and the grass and all that gets rejigged. So that's the difference here. This was the low res, and you can see these edges here by the river, and this is essentially the same height map, but it can now be resolved at a much higher resolution, and it looks smoother. So that means more detail for all of us. Aerial shot took quite a while to render compared to something like this. That's relatively fast, because we can tell UltraScenery, hey, all those trees behind the camera, don't worry about them. Just delete them. Don't render them. Don't even give them to Iray. And that's, that speeds up render time. And that is that's a technique called culling. So we'll talk about that as well. Here's another one. And these don't take a long time to make. This is quite fascinating how you can have that power at your fingertips inside of Daz Studio. So I'm kind of getting addicted to making more and more of these bits and pieces. We need sheep. I totally tell you, we do need sheep. Maybe we can bring a sheep in. Do I have sheep in Daz Studio? I've got cats. I've got a walking shark by Joe Quick. He's very cool. I've been meaning to put him into Unreal Engine, one of those things. This is actually a content pack from UltraScenery 1. So that's a good example of how UltraScenery 1 content, like these trees and even these the pond map and all that, that can be used for UltraScenery 2. So if you already have content like that, you can totally reutilize that up to a point. So there's certain things that are not supported, like UltraScenery XT, that's the expansion, I believe. There's also something called the accelerator, and that is also no longer necessary because the UltraScenery 2 already accelerates as much as it can, so that's no longer necessary. Here's the final one I've made, tropical path less travel type thing. This is also an UltraScenery 1 content pack. So let's see how we can do all that. The Daz store has sheep, but have I bought them, Matthew? That's my question. Let's see how we can do all that. So inside of Daz Studio, you have, if you're familiar with UltraScenery 1, that used to be available as a script product. So you would go and search here, and I think it was under utilities, UltraScenery, there we go, and you execute a bunch of scripts from the content library, and that has changed. So now we have a tab for that, the UltraScenery 2 tab, and after installation you don't need to put in a serial number. It sort of happens automatically. So, but if it's not showing, then you can either go and right click anywhere on your tab. So you can also drag that off to a second monitor. I find it quite nice to have it displayed here on the left hand side. You can either right click here and say add pane, and then you pick UltraScenery 2 from here. Or you can head over here to, as in the window, workspace. No, that's not correct. Window panes, and then you pick it from here, UltraScenery 2. And there it is. So you can drag that off, you can move it around wherever it fits. You might, it's sort of a long list. So I would say put it where the whole list is expanded. I'm not a fan of lists being, this small on the sidebar. There's a lot of things that you have to go and scroll through there. So UltraScenery makes itself these landscape objects, and you can do that straight from the tab, so with the plus icon, or you can head over to create, and then there is the UltraScenery 2 scene. And that looks like just a regular object in your scene, so either way will work. Gives you a little dialog that says, hey, what do you want it to call it? You can rename it later. I'll just leave it on the default, and you can also give it a resolution, and we can also change that later. So 128 is the UltraScenery 1 resolution, and that works perfectly fine still, but you can go up to 4 times higher with 256, or 4 times higher than 256, which is technically 16 times higher than 128, which is 512. And we'll have a look at the implications of that later. I'm going to leave it at the default here. Click OK. And then we see, just for a brief second there, that a flat plane appears, and then it sort of disappears because that plane is being modified with all kinds of exciting stuff. And we'll have a look what that is. I'm going to go and close all these things down, and then we'll go through all of this together here. And we'll start at the very top here. We look at this. This here is essentially the black and white height map that is applied to a flat plane, and that is it under modifiers? No, it's under generators. Exactly, that's the eroded hills one here. So if I just trying to close things down so that we don't get confused by stuff. If I go and disable eroded hills, then we have a flat plane again. And that resolution that I was talking about earlier is probably going to come apparent if you switch this to the wire shaded option. Then we can see the resolution of the plane. I'll talk a little bit about navigation in a moment because Daz Studio isn't really made for navigating those long distances, and we're gonna have to find some ways around that, and I'll show you some tips and tricks around that. So this is the subdivision of the landscape, so to say. And if I go and I forgot where there was now. There was a way to change the resolution of the landscape, but where was that? Wasn't that under scene properties? I'm pretty sure it was. Was it not? Maybe I'll have to show you that later, because there's a little drop down that lets you change this retrospectively from 128 to 256 and 512, and then you'll see more resolution here, and I'm sure we'll get back to that. But if I go back and enable my eroded hills, which are enabled by default, then you can see that the landscape now has, you know, bits and pieces sticking out, and the amount of how these hills are interpreted, or like how these black and white values are interpreted, they happen under the where is everything? Where is stuff? I can't find things anymore. I could have sworn it was here earlier. This worked so well during rehearsal, guys. I can't believe it. That's crazy. Do I need to start again? Expand terrain, possibly. Brian, let's try that. There we go. Brian totally gets the golden ticket. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. There it is. So cool. We can look at both these things now. So the first thing is that the max and min altitude here, under terrain, by the way, is interpreting the amount of black and white values here. So if you look from the front, your little cube says front, you can see that the high values are white, and the darker value, the valleys are black. So black is down, white is up, and everything like gray is in between, sort of thing. And if you wanted to go and make the hills more pronounced, you can go and change the max altitude here from 5 to something else. I'll go extreme. I'll go something like 20, and then you'll see that it looks like this. So it's the same height map, but it gets interpreted differently. So it's essentially more contrast applied, and you know, you have higher hills and deeper valleys. So maybe we'll go with something like 10. But remember, this is still a completely flat plane, so that's important to remember. I'll go and zoom in here with my mouse wheel like a crazy person, and we'll worry about navigation in a moment. And while I remember where that is, this is the resolution that the landscape currently has here, 128, and that means the peaks and troughs, they'll have limited resolution. If I go and change that to 256, then you can see that the polygons are being smoothed out. You have more resolution, and as a result, the way these hills are now being displayed it has more resolution. If this ever happens to you, that you think, hey, my pane is empty, what's happening? You got to select the Ultrascenery object in your scene tab. That's important here. And let me go and show you 512. That has even more resolution. So quite exciting. And the more you do to the landscape, the more of an implication this has, like I've shown you in the aerial shot there. It worked in rehearsal, that old chestnut, I tell you. Same thing, time and time again. And this thing has a lot of tabs, I tell you. I'm going to go and change this back to 128 just because, you know, for my computer's performance sake. So since this is an overlay here, the eroded hills is an overlay, know that we can add other overlays to this thing. And there's some that are generated on the fly, and there's some that you can add with your own map. So if you wanted to add your own map to it and carve out a particular river or particular lake or particular valley, you can do that, and we'll see later how. If I just add this noise option here, then I can see that there's different things appearing in my viewport, and you can also see that this black and white image has changed, and that's because the noise tab now overlays something else, and you have a bit of an influence of what you can do there. So first of all, and this is how all these procedural things work, first of all, you have the type of noise that is generated here. This is currently cellular noise, but you have a bunch of others that you can try out. Then second, second, you have the seed. The seed is sort of the random number generator that this thing uses under the hood. You don't have to type in something crazy. You can just go 1 up and you'll see that there's a change that happens. So even small changes sometimes have large effects. But the good thing is every time you type in that number, it'll have exactly the same effect. That's kind of cool. You also have scales and all kinds of things like how much or how little of these black and white dots are generated, how smooth they are. So if I'm going to go and type this 10 here, then this is blurred out, and that has the effect that, you know, there's not that many sharp bits and pieces there. Oh, I set this to like 1. And there's always good to have a little bit of smoothing. So now you can see what this looks like in isolation and also what it looks like combined. And this is also the mystery behind how we bring in our own height maps. We wouldn't use this in noise. I can't swap out this map. I can't swap out the eroded maps, the eroded hills map. But I can swap out the height map. So if you go over here and enable that, and then go and pick yourself an image, any image will work, doesn't have to be black and white. But if you wanted to add something, I happen to have something like a circle thing here. As long as it's black and as long as it's square, then you can see what happens here. So this is my major hill, my major lake here. And it gets overlaid with all these other things. So I can go and not use noise, for example. I can also not use the eroded hills. And then I have literally just my map. So if you have a height map from somewhere else that you want to bring in, you do that under the height map channel. So quite nice. This is like a, you know, like a, could almost be like a volcano or something. And all this was literally, it was a black and white, just a circular selection in Photoshop, smoothed it out a bit, blurred it out a bit, and then, you know, 512 map, so that's totally enough. But yeah, so this is how the landscape gets generated. But then the really cool thing, and I'm just going to go bring the eroded hills back, no noise, no height map for now, is what UltraScenery then does to that map. So that happens, if we just close this down here for a second, that happens under the Ecology tab. So an ecology is something that you can pick. So over here in this menu, you can either browse if you already know what it is. You just select it from here, or you just hit browse, and then this little browser icon comes up and it shows you the types of materials that are now going to be applied to your landscape. So I'm going to stick with the first one here. That's fine. And then there's also water and biome here. So I think that's something else that's hidden under terrain. There are terrain presets, once again, that get overlaid over this, and same principle applies. Browse, and this is the base content that comes with UltraScenery. So I'm sure that over time we're going to see expansions to this. So currently we only have base content, and notice that UltraScenery 1 content isn't actually in here just yet. It totally is a sinkhole, Trevor. Yes, exactly. So we're going to probably have, you know, expansion packs to this. But for now, base content is fine. We have rivers, 4 of them to choose from, and we have a few paths to choose from. And the rest currently, I think we have to do with our custom height maps. Well, let me go and show you one with a river here. Maybe this one here. River 2, River 1, Windy River, River 2. Let's do that. When I click that, then you can see that another map gets added to my landscape, and we have this little river thing here. Let me go and change this back to filament. That is not representative of what your render is going to look like, by the way. The shader here, this is all just looks green right now, so this is going to look very different later on. River applies a particular resolution to this. So if you were to do this in 128, I suppose you would get these squarish bits that you could see from the top, and we'll leave everything on the defaults for now. So once we've done that, we can go scroll to the very bottom here and ignore classic content for now, but click on biome here. Water, it's already applied, but you can apply a different type of water filter here in water preset. We'll leave the defaults for now, and we're going to have a look at how to change that later and what the effect of that is. But for now, biome, that's where the real power happens. So enable that, and then it goes and does something at one point. Why doesn't it do it now? That's crazy. Why does it not? Why does it happen? Where do I do that then? I'm sure there was all kinds of things that happened there in rehearsal. I tell you, how could I have made those pictures otherwise? Biome. Where do I choose my biome? Ecology. Is that it? No, that's not it. Let's work this out together. Oh, really? Can you amend them? X201, have you tried that already? It's not displacement, it's not zero edge. Or zero edge, I can talk about that later, and erosion. Zero edge means basically the ends of that plane, how you want those to look. If you switch that off, then you can see that the edges are all sort of, you know, crumpled. And if you have a sort of higher elevation like 10, then this isn't going to fit seamlessly onto one another. But with the zero edge, if you enable that, they sort of get flattened out, and you have an influence over where that happens. So that's kind of cool as well. So north, east, south, and west. The way this works is if you look from the front of your landscape, from here, this here is north, and this is south. So if we wanted to shoot something like from here, and I'm really not keen on looking under the plane like this, you can go and enable the south, the front bit here, and just make that a bit more, like, you know, 60%, and then you can see that these edges get tamed down. So 100% means it's completely flat, and then the percentage is how much that encroaches into the plane. So if you put that to, I think 100% is to basically 50% of your whole landscape. So this is now flattened out here, and up to half the landscape it just goes and, you know, lets the actual height map get generated there. So maybe that's a bit much, but flatten it out like this, 50, and then maybe put that to 10%, and then we have a few tamer hills here. That's that edge. But how do I put my exciting plants on there now? I swear to you that was possible. If it wasn't that, how did that work? It wasn't that. That's just the landscape. It's something to do with the ecology, isn't it? It's not that. It's not the modifiers. Ecology biome. Wasn't there something I could select at one point? I tell you, there was a drop down that let me choose a biome, and I don't see that anymore. Ecology. Oh, is that there it is. Oh my, that was hidden. How exciting. Brian, thank you so much. That's what I was looking for. Exactly. This is the exciting part. This is the exciting part. So once again, pick if you already know what it is, or hit browse, and then it'll get populated with all kinds of bits and pieces. So grassland, we have a few to choose from. And again, this is going to get expanded over time, I'm sure. Or there's oaks. Very cool. Very cool. Or oaks in the fall, or oaks in the winter with no leaves. And more oaks. That's exciting stuff too. Maybe these ones here, they look quite nice. So let's do that. Hit OK. All the cool stuff is hidden. One of those things. Isn't that cool? I really, really appreciate if you give me tips like that. Art, what's going down? Now we find it. This is good. Also uncovering these bugs together. I love it. I love it. So this might be confusing if you think, hey, the preview showed me so much and I see so little. What's going down here? The system does this to conserve resources. And you might be familiar with these two types of icons. The camera icon means this layer, and there's a lot of layers in here. The camera icon means it'll show up in the render. The little eyeball icon means it'll show up in the preview. So right now my oak trees are showing and the reeds are showing, but none of the river stones and the stream side grass and the river logs are showing, but they will. Oh, river logs are actually showing, but the everything that is disabled here will show in the render. So that is good. So one note about the navigation when it comes to putting our camera in place that we can see something maybe from this direction, and I'll just go and show the river here. Daz Studio really isn't designed to navigate these long distances. So if you scroll with your mouse button back and forth, this is going to get tedious really, really fast. So what I like doing is, well, two things really. If you have objects dotted around in your scene like a camera, you can go and select them and hit Control F on your keyboard and zoom in there rather fast. So if you don't have anything, you can go and create yourself something like a primitive. Let's say a sphere. It doesn't have to be large, but I might make that 2 meters here. It'll get by default created in the center of the scene, which is not really going to be that great for us because it'll be underneath the landscape here. So I'll go and bring that up a little bit, like so, and then you can hit Control F and zoom right into that, so you get a bit closer to the action. And you can also position that, of course, wherever you needed that to be. Shame we don't have that feature that I like about Unreal Engine, where you move an object and you hold down the shift key, and then the camera follows you around wherever you put that object. So let's put the sphere here so that whenever you want to go back to close to the river, Control F will make that happen. And if you wanted to go back to the wide shot, you select your UltraScenery object, Control F, and then you see the whole thing again. So that's how you can do that. Another thing, if you did need to navigate a different way and you really wanted to approach this and you don't have a mouse that does this fast enough, you can use the keyboard navigation with WASD and also Q and E to do that, in conjunction with this little icon here, the Scene Navigator tool. So if I select that, then I can left click and drag in the viewport to look around as if it was a third person or first person video game. And if I press W, I go forward. And the speed at which I go forward is set on the Tool Settings tab. So if this is set to a really low value, like 5, then it's not gonna really make an impact, because you barely see that at these large distances you're moving. I mean, you can tell I am moving with 5, but it really is still too slow. So if you make this a larger value, what is the largest we can do? I think it's 100. Maybe 199, is that? No, 100 is the largest value we can use here. And then you can go and press, just hold down the W key, and then you can traverse the river, so to say. And then Q and E gets you up and down. And this is also nice for strafing. So A and D strafes your camera. So this is, I use that sometimes when I want to position my camera. And this goes backwards, and sadly Q and E are not the same way as they are in Unreal Engine. So if you're used to that navigation, it's going to be problematic. So let's say this is a nice shot here. Let's frame up a camera at this point and just make one. So create new camera, and I'll apply the perspective view so that it doesn't come in at the center of the scene there. And in my render settings, I'll give it sort of a nice 16:9 resolution here, something like, let's do this here, 2K, that'll be good. And to see what I'm framing up, I'm going to go and show the aspect frame, and there it is. So select your camera, and we're almost in sort of good shape, I take it. Oh yeah, the other thing we can do is change what the camera is, the focal length of the camera. Under camera, default is 65. Since it's a landscape, I might want to see a little bit more, so maybe 38 or 18 or something like that. Let's use that. So that's nice. Obviously, sphere we don't really want to see, so let's go and make it invisible. And let's see what this would look like once we save the scene. Let's go and save that as stream 1. Dual meaning title, the stream that is the water, also the stream, the thing that we're doing. Is that cool or what? If 2 meter isn't large, I'm scared to find out what is. Well, 512 by 512, or kilometers. I forgot what it says in the manual, how large landscapes you can create here. I like low shots here. I like low shots. Also notice that there's nothing in the background here. Just before I hit render, which of course you can do at any time to see all these other bits and pieces that it puts in here. There's one other thing I wanted to bring to your attention. If you select the UltraScenery object and head over to its tab at the very top under optimization, there's this camera option here, and camera culling is this technique that I told you about earlier. If you switch this to the camera you're using, then behind the camera these trees are not going to be rendered, which is nice. So that means the render isn't going to take that long. Let's go and hit Control S, and we might want to use a proper HDRI. I'm currently not using anything other than the default that comes with Daz Studio, but hit Control R and we'll just see what comes out. Am I a number man or a number man? That's a good question. That is a good question. Do you know, Art, that is a really, really good point. UltraScenery is currently on sale, which is really, really nice. I think it's in honor of our stream. That's really, really cool. That and some related content that you can purchase. have a look. If you already have UltraScenery 1 content, it's a no-brainer to buy it because it lets you make really exciting little pictures inside Daz Studio. And then partly the reason why this is exciting is because it looks like there's a particular customer for us, and this is just this exciting for you to hear as it was for me to hear. They come to the Daz website because they want to use Bryce, and Bryce is of course an old lady now, and it doesn't get updates anymore. And even though it's a great application, or it was in its day, it doesn't support GPUs, neither does Carrara, and it's really cool to have these sort of tools in the application that we're most familiar with. Look at that. I mean, with the correct HDRI and with the correct lighting, you can see all kinds of exciting things that are happening here. So not only do we have a cool water material, we also have these trees that are quite clearly losing their leaves, but they're also excluding these zones where the leaves have fallen. There's no grass in there, and that is quite cool. So the generators do all that. A riverbed, there's pebbles here, there's the reef grass and all that, and it doesn't take all that long to render. So this was 1 minute and 40 seconds for about 200 instances, so for 200 ray bounces, and this is at 2K resolution, so not so bad at all. Let me go and just close it and put in a HDRI that I've downloaded from Polyhaven so that we can see something in the background, and also that we see a bit of see how nice it can look with the right lighting, and also show you how to preview the lighting with filament. So under render settings, under environment, I'm just going to go and replace this here. I think they're all still in my downloads folder here, just 4 of them. Autumn Field, Pure Sky, that's literally just sky with nothing else. That should do the trick. Takes a moment to process that, and we'll go and switch on the dome as well. So at the moment that changes, we can go and have a look at just a little bit of a preview of what that looks like here. So under environment, you can use the dome Y orientation to turn that around, and in Iray it'll be a little tricky to preview this, but this is nice. So this has this hot spot of the sun over here, so Y will just rotate that, and filament will show you this in glorious fidelity. Imagine we wanted to bring the sun down a little bit. We can try the dome X and Z rotation. That's usually not something we do, but since this is a Pure Sky HDRI, let's go bring it down. There we go. See what that looks like. Let me go and save this, and then so yeah, one thing, if I switch this over to Iray, it's still classed as the viewport, so we're still not seeing any of the other things that the generator puts in there, but it will, like the trees, but it will at least give us a bit of an indication of what does this look like. So if I wanted to go and change my sun now that the reflection is properly accounted for, I could go and make that happen. Yeah, that might look a little nicer potentially. Giant Mr. Blobby, we can't have that. Okay, I like that. Perfect. This is great. Okay, let me go stop Iray, go back to filament, and go Control S, because I'm one of those people who has learned to save, and go render this. See what that looks like now. You can totally do that. Oh, also, if you find it still takes too long to render your UltraScenery scenes, you can render those as HDRIs, of course. That's what UltraScenery is always really, really good for. You put a spherical camera into the position that you like, and then go and render that out as a HDRI. Very, very cool idea. So we've got strong sunlight coming from the other side, so this becomes a little bit of a silhouette. You can be inventive about that. You could make yourself like a 20-meter reflective plane that you shine against the trees now, basically on a larger scale what photographers do. Or you can go and turn the sun around so that it's behind you or comes from a nice angle, maybe from the right-hand side. We should try that next. quite nice. But so it doesn't take all that long. I was really surprised about that. Look at that. We're already at 100 ray bounces here, or coming up to 100 ray bounces in just over a minute. This is on a 3090 card, which is now classed as really, really old technology, of course, because we should all be having 4090 cards and having already saved up for the 5090 cards. Is there no end? Crazy stuff. So not bad. If you leave this running for a bit longer, you can see all kinds of detail coming up in not only in the reflection of the water surface, but also underneath the water. So there's a way to make the water deeper. I haven't found that to make a massive difference, but there's all kinds of detail that comes out. I'm going to go and use the same HDRI and just turn this around. You see the beautiful light coming through the trees here. Very, very cool. I'm going to go and turn that around so that the light comes from the right-hand side. And I'll also change out the water material so that it looks more like a clear river rather than, you know, a muddy pond. Let's do that. So what I hadn't expected, I've got to be brutally honest with you here, is that I've had so much fun playing with this. I'm really not into landscapes all that much, but ever since I looked at that, I was thinking, oh man, I could really sink my teeth into this. So let's try to, the HDRI first. So we'll leave the X orientation maybe as it is, and just turn the Y orientation round so that it sort of comes from here. Right? I want it to be a little dramatic, but also I don't want to see too many shadows here. So it's still the low sun, but we now see the blue sky. And now the water material with the UltraScenery object selected underwater. Oops. Underwater. If this scrolls too fast for you, just hold down the shift key while you scroll, and that makes it scroll slower. This does not work on Mac, but it does work on a PC, which is kind of cool. So underwater, we do have different, this is the water depth that you can make higher or lower. So the water level and the water height, those are two different things. If you put the water depth to something like 5, then the actual thickness of the water plane gets more. If I go to the perspective view, oop, no, hang on. That's Control R and Control C. No, don't do it. Don't. Ah. No, it's fine. We didn't mean to render this. A 2 billion pixel GPU. Whew, that is a lot. I hear NVIDIA are now the world's largest and most valuable tech company. The world's most valuable tech company. I forgot the value because it was too big for my brain to remember, but it is sort of crazy to think about that, isn't it? They're facing here. This is the water depth. That's what I was changing there. The water depth, 5 meters versus 1 meter. That's what that does. So, you know, deep waters, still waters lie deep. So a brook really wouldn't be all that deep, but if you make oceans and stuff like that, maybe this one's, I'll go back to 1 meter here. It's not going to make a major difference because we're only going to see to the bottom of the landscape ditch. So even if I make this like, 20 meters deep, we're not going to look at that because the landscape is going to prohibit us from looking at that. But what I want to do is change the, water level. Sorry, that's the other thing. Water level is at 0. If I go back to my camera view here, I can go and make this flood the landscape in a bit. So water height, if I go put that to, 1 meter, it goes, it seems to rise as if things get flooded, which is kind of cool. Water height. I'm not sure what water level is, if that is the same. Oh, I see. This sort of a coarse and fine, I suppose. So yeah, you can make that a lot larger. We're now underwater. This I shouldn't have done that. I suppose also the whole yeah, there we go. The landscape generator also then adjusts what grows where. So trees can't be half underwater. So it goes and rejigs that. That's what this also does. It's kind of cool. So if I go and make this go back to 2 meters, the water lowers itself and you can see the bottom, the little yellow strip that sort of calculates where the trees can be. That is pretty cool, isn't it? So it reacts to whatever changes you make on the landscape there. I think this is still a bit too big here. I think 0 was quite nice. I like the stream like this. If I see this now and I'm thinking, hey, this tree is sort of hanging around, occluding my camera, I can just go and pick a different seed. Then the distribution of the trees will be a little different. But so water material, let's do that. You can either pick them yourself under water material properties, or you can pick a different preset here. And default water is that, but maybe I'm going to do blue ocean water. Let's do that. And that literally just fills this in with different parameters here. I'll hit Control S and let this render. It's crazy, isn't it, Trevor? And it really isn't difficult to do this. It's so realistic and it's so much fun to play with, I have to say. And it's something that took me by surprise. I have to be really honest with you. I remember enjoying Carrara landscapes and modifying those back in the day, though. That was my favorite pastime, and figuring out how that thing works. And in Carrara, of course, you could make your own procedural trees as well. I'm using the denoiser as well here, and I will also show you another little trick that makes the colors pop a little bit more in these renders by using the spectral rendering. That can look quite nice as well. Look, we're getting so much light now that I'm thinking we can probably turn down the intensity of the HDRI. We'll still retain that sky, but the colors will just be a little bit more deep. And it's cool. It's literally, and seeing this come together in front of your eyes with your own technology is breathtaking. It's really cool, I have to say. It really is fast, and this is because of that camera culling. If you disable that, or if you have shots in which you have to, in which you show more stuff, so like this is sort of cleverly done. We could benefit from a little bit of background objects here. Perhaps a second UltraScenery landscape that could go in the background here. But anything that's behind the tree is just simply isn't rendered. Anything that is behind the camera or outside the camera's view simply isn't rendered, and that's why it's so fast. And if you hadn't had that enabled, then it really takes a while. Like that aerial shot that I showed you earlier, the one that didn't actually look all that amazing. Not this one, but this one. This took forever to render. So we're talking about half an hour to an hour at 1,000 iterations. And it's just because there's so many of these objects that need to be rendered and sent to the GPU. That's why that takes so long. Yeah, so this is the high-res version, and this was the low-res version. So that's what the resolution difference is on the landscape. And of course, the placement of the objects is different as well. This one, I get more patches here in the green. This is actually a sort of a mountain that comes up, and this is how the shader works. So if it's flat, you grow grass, but if it reaches a certain angle, then grass isn't allowed to grow, and we're just having rocks there. And I'm expecting that there's going to be a lot of add-on packs for this available, going forward. With characters, even relatively simple to go with characters in here. And this is if you wanted to align those with the ground, you really need to have your proxy objects in the scene so that you can place them properly. And this is also where I recommend you work with 2 viewports, one that shows what your camera sees and another one where you run around. Maybe we can do that. Maybe we can go and place a character in later. But I think the ones without characters, they just look spectacular, don't they? So very, very cool. Or a few animated crabs, yes, or sheep. Yeah, so a bit less light, I'm thinking. A bit less light, and also maybe we're going to try a different HDRI. Let's try that. Let's try different HDRI. That gives us a little bit of background here as well. Let's do that. And less light. I like it. Do we want to save that? Let me see how far are we here. We've got just 500 iterations, so that might not be bad. I'm gonna go and cancel this and just save it so that we can manipulate it a little bit later. I think we can do much better than this, perhaps with a different biome. I'll go and pick a folder on my desktop. I'll call that one Stream Renders, and I'll call that one Test 1. Haha, clever title. Perfect. So different HDRI, just a note on HDRIs, of course. My favorite go-to source, aside from the Daz store, is Polyhaven. And if you head over here to Assets HDRIs, they also have textures and models these days, which is kind of cool. You can see all kinds of HDRI. So if something that were to blend in with what we have might be something like this, Symmetrical Garden 2. Or maybe we wanted to slightly overcast here, overcast soil, pure sky. That might look nice. Let's download that. Resolution, 8K is probably overkill enough as it is, and I'll go and use the HDRI. Daz Studio can handle both HDR and EXR formats, but other applications are not so forgiving, so I think Daz Studio can handle both. So I'll download this. And then the other one is this one here, Symmetrical Garden. Let's go and do that as well. So this will give us the sky, but it will also give us some sort of background geometry to look at. So let's take a look at that. That would go under Render Settings. Over here, Environment Map. Symmetrical Garden, let's try that. Oh, okay. Trevor, that sounds exciting. I thought it was pretty cool what Carrara had to offer in that regard. Oh, X201, that is a great tip. I haven't looked into that yet, but yeah, good idea. Good idea. Look at that, completely different look and feel. Let me go and put this to the defaults here and just play around with this. So Y will sort of blend in some of those trees in the background. So you don't want it to look like this, perhaps, or like that. You can also change the size, of course, of the HDRI so that we see maybe more of the clouds and these sort of buildings here a little bit smaller. That's something we could try, as if the river sort of goes towards that. This is something you would do in a dome mode. So from infinite sphere, you change that to something like finite sphere. And then we'll go and change the dome scale multiplier from 100 to something maybe like 50. Or maybe even 10. Oh, actually, this is something we can't preview in Filament. So let's try to preview that in Iray and just look at the background here and see how the HDRI is projected. You see, this is probably a little bit too small then. That orientation, let's go put that back to 0. Oh, I already had that minus 100. There we go. There. So 50 is still a bit large. Notice the size of this thing here. Put that to sort of 30. And now it's small enough to disappear. And now we can actually see the curvature of the sky dome. So that's not what we want. So maybe something like 40. It's not going to work. So not the right HDRI for the job. So we'll go and move it out of the way and show a few more clouds instead. There's some exciting updates coming to filament, by the way. Maybe something like this, you know, that we can see this sort of landscape here in the background, more or less, whatever tickles our fancy. Oh yeah, and I also wanted to change the intensity of the HDRI, so make that dim down a little bit, so that we're not blowing out the landscape. Look at that, these trees, they come from the HDRI now, so that might fill in some of the background. And yeah, the clouds are blowing out, so that we could do that on the environment intensity, 0.5 maybe. There we go. And then that brings out the sky. And on this occasion also, let me show you the spectral rendering. This is kind of cool. This is off by default, but if you enable that, then the colors will be represented slightly differently. So my preferred setup is to use this one here, 701 linear. But if you switch this to, say, 2020, that's a different color space, so the colors are mapped differently, and you can see they pop a lot more. You've got a option here between faithful and natural. Faithful sometimes looks a little bit artificial, so natural is a better choice for that. And you can see that especially on the colors red and blue, also how they come out on characters. So this looks a little artificial, so perhaps it's not great for sky, but have a look and play with these. There's also here the Spectral Observer. I can't really tell you what exactly these parameters do, but you know, if you play around with them, they just give your render a different look, and that's kind of nice. XYZ, let's have a look at that. Yeah, okay, that looks more like the toxic toxic wasteland ground here, post-apocalyptic bits and pieces. What does this do? ACES 2065. Sounds like a chemical formula there already, doesn't it? So yeah, I recommend you. Oh, this isn't bad. That's not bad. See how that comes out with the trees. I recommend the Rec 2020. So 601 is the broadcast space for EBU and SMPTE. 709 is a slightly expanded version of the RGB space, and 2020 is closer, I think, to the Adobe color space. I think, don't quote me on this. And natural makes it look a little better. So let's go and use this and do the rest in post-production. Let's do that. Save the scene before we do anything else. And did I change the intensity? Yes, I did. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Matthew, good question. Will I be touching on Creator One Extender? I don't actually know what that is, to be honest. Is that a thing for UltraScenery? All I know that the original UltraScenery had was something called an alienator. I think Totte made that, Code 66. He made a script for that, and it allowed us to bring, oh, that's on my other screen here, there we go. That allowed us to change objects in UltraScenery with a different one. So you can then go, there we go, more saturated colors and in much more exciting sky there. Let's let that cook for a little bit, because I think that has potential here. Yes, the alienator, that used to work with UltraScenery 1. But it doesn't work with 2. However, I have it on good authority that Totte is working on another version that will be compatible with UltraScenery 2. So that means you can replace the trees with, I don't know, logs or cars and stuff like that. So you can use the procedural abilities of UltraScenery to, you know, bring something like the Mars landscape where there are no trees about. So that is something that's coming. But I don't know what Creator One Extender is. Sorry. Maybe that is what you're talking about. As I don't know, X201. It's possible. The one thing I can tell you before we have a look at how to use legacy content in UltraScenery 2 is that I have something called UltraScenery XT. in addition to UltraScenery 1, which if you want to use legacy content, that needs to be installed, by the way. So I didn't know this either. I hadn't had it installed, and I was thinking, where's my legacy stuff? Yeah, it needs to be installed. So that's the trick about it. And the UltraScenery XT was an expansion system for UltraScenery, but that, as far as I know, is not compatible with UltraScenery 2. I'm going to pour myself another cup of coffee while this is rendering. And if you do have any questions about this or any other aspect of Daz Studio, of course, don't hesitate to ask. We always have time. Oh, XT! Oh, right. Okay. Got you, Matthew. Yes, XT is not supported as far as I can tell, but that might just be because my lack of knowledge, or maybe it's coming. I'm not entirely sure. Coffee, indeed, yes. I will raise the Daz merch question, by the way. That is something that's still on my list of things to do. One other thing that you can use just to get your renders looking handsome, a little bit of depth of field, but it's also relatively easy to do this in the post-production. It might be better to do this. So with landscapes, it's often that you have a deep focus in the background, but then some of the foreground objects are not in focus. But since these things take a while to render, it might be more beneficial if you do this in post-production. So we'll come to that in a moment. If ever you needed that, I can show you a couple of tricks how you do this in Photoshop. But of course, that technique is also available in other other applications. I'm just wondering, are these fish? Are those koi? They're just stones, aren't they? They're not koi. So what have you been up to this summer? How was your summer? Is it hot? Is your winter cold in the southern hemisphere? Trout, that's what they are, Anita. Welcome, by the way. Good to see you. Trout, they look like trout. They're going to be trout. The longer you let this render, 2,000, 5,000 iterations, the realism just becomes more and more, and it's crazy to think that if you render it and it's got like 100, 200 iterations, and you think, yeah, well, I'm not sure if it's that realistic. Let it render. This is the same as with characters. Just give it some time and let it cook, and then look again with fresh eyes and go like this. Oh, it's crazy. You always need fish. Nate, how is your time zone bits and pieces going? Have you settled back in onto Canadian time just yet? Nate's been in Lisbon, which is so far away from where he lives, so it's been a couple of weeks since you're back, but it's one of those things. Piranha, probably. Or that in decimal, yes. Possible. We let this render to about 1,000 iterations. By the way, if you ever feel like when a render is finished and you feel like I wish it had cooked a little bit longer, you can just go and open this More tab here. That used to be this tiny tab on the side. If you open that, you get some render settings that you can override. So we'll let this render up to 1,000 iterations here. And when you click less, so that they've just made it into a button, because that little tiny bit that was very, very hidden, but very useful. So over here under progressive render, these are my render settings here right now. And max samples is set to 1,000. You should also crank this up max time so that it has time to get these 1,000 iterations there. But once the render is finished, you can change this number, and don't save it, don't cancel it, don't quit out of it. You can change this number to something like 2,000, and then you just press that button on the bottom, which is save, is going to be turned into resume, and when you do that, it just goes and renders the next 1,000 iterations. So that's kind of cool. It doesn't start again from scratch. It just adds more iterations to the existing image. That's quite cool. You're naturally waking up at 5:30 a.m. Yeah. No, this is good. This is good. I'm glad. I remember it took me a while to do that. After my first long distance flight, it took me a day or so to adjust when I went from Germany over to America for the first time. Late 90s, that was. Mid 90s, maybe. But it took me 3 months to adjust back to German time. So what does that say about where I wanted to live? So yeah, one of those things. So this is now it. This is 1,000 iterations finished. Finished rendering, yes, indeed. And so now we could go and I'll go get out of the way so you can see everything here. I can now go and save it, but that'll close this window out. Or I can go and close it and that will just not save my render. Or I can go and type in a different number here. And let's say 2000. And then you see, oh, that's where that button is. That now you can go and resume. So if you do that, it'll just start at iteration 1001 and go and keep rendering. So if you ever needed to have something, you know, look better and you think it's not quite there, it needs more iterations, you don't have to start again from the beginning. I'll call this one test 2 and just go and save it. But yeah, that's a good little tip here. Uh-oh, I'll hang on here. I'll hang on until that time. Good luck with them. That is good. That is good, Anita. I appreciate that's good to know. Hey, tell you what, let's go and make a new scene here. Let me go and get that out. Just make it a new scene. Don't save this because we've already saved it. And have a look at I just make the whole thing again, because every time you do it, it looks slightly different. And you can see the camera clipping here. It's just, you know, these large landscapes, Daz Studio really isn't designed for that. So the navigation, yeah, it's one of those things. You don't want to use the mouse button unless you absolutely have to. Create yourself a primitive and go Control F onto that, or use the WASD keyboard navigation to make that a little bit faster. I would hope that's going to be improved over time, because that'd be really good. So back on the UltraScenery tab, let's go and make ourselves a new object. You can name it because you can also make yourself multiple. So let that do its thing. This is my current one. You can duplicate these as well, or you can just create another one. So I could just go and click plus again, and I'll call it UltraScenery maybe 3. How's that? So if you needed something in the background, you can stagger these things up, of course, you know. So this looks like there's just 2 of them overlaid, but if you go and grab this one, this is the front here, isn't it? So you can go and move one of them back, and then, you know, have this as your distant mountains, for example. So under terrain, this one might want to set that to sort of like 20 here, and then since we know this is the front, I don't want that massive hill at the front here. I could go and do something if I can find it. My goodness, there's just so many things. Well, the modifiers, yes, 0 edge. Let's put 0 edge here, and then make the north of it not so much 100%. Put that to 50 here, and then make that sort of like 50%. 20%? I'm looking at the wrong thing. The north is actually this. What I need to do is do the same thing with the south. Duh. Yes, there we go. So we want to put that to maybe 50, so that mountain disappears, and also make that kind of like 75 maybe. But yes, definitely start at 100% on the front, so we don't see that. So now if we had this in the background, you can go and duplicate these sort of smaller things. You can stretch them out, so it's possible to stretch and squash these things and also rotate them around. You can just handle them like regular objects here. But I think in this case, I might just go and make it duplicate that. So that's edit. Duplicate node is fine. That means we have now 3 UltraScenery objects, and this one you can go and move over here and then blend those together if you did need something, you know, something nice in the background. So this is you know, you have that option as well if you did need that. Or there's also there's other options to use the what are they called now? There we go. That'll work. So you don't see anything in the background. You can go and move these together. There's these other products that come with what are they called again? They come with the HDRI and with background geometry. You can mix those in as well. I forgot what they're called. Ravenlaw and guy from the UK. Can't remember his name. What's it called? What's he called? So I don't know if we're gonna need those, but I'll go leave them in here, and we'll see how that looks in the background there if we don't put any biomes in. Let me go and pick I'm gonna go and call this one BG1, and this one's gonna be called BG2. BG2, and this one is UltraScenery main. And see when Jay's computer Terradome. No, it's not Terradome. It's a brain's gone blank. I'm sure I'll get there. So, okay, it's bugging me now. Let's see if we can find out. On the Daz store, we will find out together, I tell you. But Terradome is also very cool. He works together with Ravenlaw. Dimension Theory, it wasn't him either. And it's called... Kindred Arts, of course. My God, how can I forget? He's an environmental wizard, and he has a series of products that is called... It's not really the Apocalypse. It's Megaterrain. That's it, Megaterrain. So if you ever come across those, ooh, that's on sale. That's very cool. Those things are great because they have this whole distant geometry built in, and they're really designed to have something on a much smaller scale that you can just that has environment as well as background geometry. So those are great as well. Highly recommended. And he has a ton of other stuff, like in Megaterrain. That's it, Highlands. I remember having that because he has this sort of distant fog and background geometry as well as a few bushes. So it's all very simplified, but often that is all you need, especially for background bits and pieces. So sometimes it's overkill to have a full UltraScenery object in the background because that really eats up a ton of resources. So careful with that. But yeah, let's go with main, and let's use some classic content for that. So we're going to leave this as is. Might even go and switch those off so that we know what's what for us. And I think let's start with the camera here already. Active viewport. Let's do that. That's our camera, and on this, I can just go and tell it this is the camera. Call it maybe main cam or something. Main cam. And pick some classic content. So I think we go and still use a terrain. Or do we go straight into classic content? Ecologies. Let's see if we can make it happen. Ecology. Oh, there we go. I've got Britain, and I've got grasslands, and I've got tropics, and I've got woodlands. So Britain sounds good. Britain 3 maybe. This looks almost like the Harpwood Trail here, Britain 6. But then of course there's grasslands 2, but we don't have a water object in there. I do like a bit of water. Maybe tropics. Let's go with this tropics 1. Let's see what that looks like. So I've had some crashes with UltraScenery 1 content if you swap out the ecology. So let's stick with what we have, because the moment we pick something else, I have found that Daz Studio seems to crash. So just something to be aware of. Kindred Arts 60 to 70% off. Ooh, I like it. I like it. Oh, is that so? I didn't know. Eating right and drinking lots of water. Do you know, I didn't know that. But it does make perfect sense, doesn't it? So it looks like nothing is showing, but that is only because on the bottom here, these instances, they're all seemingly disabled. So we do have 800 palm trees, but I'm currently not seeing them. So let's go and enable them here. And there's palm trees. All right, I see. There's also large palm trees. So these are small palm trees, I guess. Large palm trees. Yes, there is a ton of stuff here that I didn't see. So let's just, because we don't have anything major to focus on, let's just focus on this maybe, like a high-ish kind of shot, and just see what that comes out. What does our main camera look like, by the way? That I could probably also just move that around a bit. Yeah, you don't want trees right in front of you. So if that ever happens, even if you don't see them in the preview, just go into your the distribution of those plants and then change the seed. Does this look? I think my preview camera actually looked a little bit better. Let me go and do this. Let me turn another camera into that new camera perspective, and I'll call that second cam, maybe alt cam, and then in my UltraScenery object at the top under optimization, I'm going to go and set that as the camera that I want to use for culling, so that it knows what not to send to Iray. And I might go and pop in an HDRI immediately rather than this one. I'm going to go and pick the other one that we just downloaded here, the Overcast Soil Pure Sky. How's that? Let's put that in. And with filament enabled, also draw dome. Let's just see what that looks like as soon as it pops in. Also, what is my camera actually framing up here? Currently, not the right aspect ratio, so let's go make that full HD, maybe 1920 render. Let's do that. Oh yes, I see. So we go and frame up the sky a little more, and this tree, whoops, and this tree out of the way, like something like that. That should be cool. Also, on my camera, there's so many things that you got to think of all the time. On the camera, on the parameters tab, on the camera, let's go give it something like a 28, maybe. That's more like a wide shot. Yeah, I like it. Save the scene. I'll call this one Stream Classic 2. Just because I want to show you this crashing thing, and just be aware it can happen if you change something. Far Cry 1, exactly, so true. And let's see what it looks like just with the default settings here. And see if we need to adjust the lighting a little bit. This is always the exciting part. You click render and you think, I don't know what's going to come out, but I'm excited to see. Yeah, some long distance flights, I know what you mean, Nate. That the thing is also, if you have these vibrations on you, it does dehydrate you. So it's important to drink. It's important to drink because you want to avoid thrombosis. Many people who didn't know they had, they had that, can get it on flights. So always good to do that. And as long as you don't go more than once or twice to the bathroom, you're okay. This friendly lady with the peanuts comes around, gives you free drinks. At least back in the day, that's what used to happen. And coffee. Oh, you just didn't. Oh, I get you. Yes, I get you. Whatever happened to this suggestion, I think on, was it Ryanair or EasyJet? Somebody made that suggestion. You could still use our bathrooms, but you have to pay us €1 to do so. I think that didn't go down so well. Squeezing money out of everyone all the time. It's crazy. Oh, do you know also about that NVIDIA discussion? One thing I have heard, you see some of the trees are just right in front of our camera. That's not good, is it? That's not what the preview looked like at all. How did that happen? Yeah, so sometimes you get these nasty surprises when you come to render. It's sort of like the colors, but it's not for us. It's not for us. Something else about some people who had been working for NVIDIA for a while, I've heard, they've noticed how much their shares were worth and decided to retire and sell them. So that left NVIDIA at, it doesn't really look like it, does it? That left NVIDIA at a bit of a disadvantage because it meant they didn't have enough engineers to do jobs anymore, which is just such a shame. Yeah, I don't really know what to do about that. We could go and see what type of palm that was and just make sure they don't render because they were just a little bit too big. See if we can fault find this. Base ground cover, leaf litter we probably want, river rocks, river logs, elephant grass, river farms, trees medium. Well, it could just be them. Was it? Yes, trees medium. Totally ruining our picnic here. So the easiest way to do that is to just click the camera icon and then they will not be rendered. And then everything we see here will be rendered. And there's also the Monstera, 300 instances. Dare I enable that? Okay, that sounds like it could stay. Let's try to render this again. Also, I think I might go and give it a little bit more of body, as they would say. Make it a bit brighter, and I might also change the render mode to Spectral, and then to my Rec 2020 here with natural colors. Let's do that. See how that goes. It's true, yes, that is correct. That is correct, Trevor. That's how that works. Daz Plus members get a steep discount on, especially on Daz Plus items, but also on Daz Originals. Permanent 50% discount, I believe. Don't quote me on that, it might be different, but it's I do know that Daz Plus members get great discounts on especially Daz Originals. I'll come back if you give me more shares. But I mean, if you've been working for a company for 10 years and you think, oh, if I retire and sell my shares and just put 12 million in the bank, come back to work tomorrow, or nah, move to Bali, put my feet up. It's too tropical. It was just too tropical. I'm so glad you're in the Daz Plus Club now, Art. I'm really glad you picked it up. That's really cool. That's really cool. So welcome, anyone who's recently joined Daz Plus. We do these streams once a month, and they're just for Daz Plus members, and you're all welcome to drop by and have a chat. I'm very happy to do something that you want to see rather than the stuff that I pick. UltraScenery seemed like a good topic. I was thinking maybe for the next stream we can have a look at, again, what's going down? For the next Daz Plus stream we can potentially look at Plant Factory, because it's also nature related, and it's something that has recently been made free. Yeah, that's just too tropical. Way too tropical. Why don't we see that? Or 2 months and 2 weeks due to flooding, that's true. Why don't we try a different biome? Let me show you what happens there. So this is something I'd rather, if you change this, and this is just for classic content, if you change this from Tropics 1 to something like, Tropics 3 maybe, the moment I hit OK on previous occasions, Daz Studio sort of quit. It's trying to change these things out, but there inevitably comes a point where that doesn't work. I think it might also be, I thought at first it's because I'm in filament, but that's not the case. So I'll switch this over to texture shaded before I do that. And I mean, maybe it works now. Let's see. Be kind of cool. You can also see how this works. It loads in these things bit by bit and then adds them to the UltraScenery object. Yeah, that's a shame. Okay, stream over. That's it. Let's try again with a different biome. Oh, that is good. X201. I didn't know that either. Ew. There's no cap on membership. I like it. Till 2027. That is pretty cool. Let's try again. One object. Oh yeah, classic content can only be at a resolution of 128. That's the only other thing that I remember. You can scale it up, but some objects might not scale with it, or the placement might be wrong. But hey, it's one of those things. Okay, here's that. And we leave the defaults. We go back to the classic content. And we go and pick features and ecologies. Let's go features. Features. We have stuff like river, pond, or track. What would you like to see? A pond or river or a trail from the classic content? You tell me. I like something with water. Water is always very dramatic. So perhaps we should try a pond, or we make our own pond like that in Photoshop. You can just paint this in and then just bring in that height map. That's possible. A trail. Let's do a trail, Jeff. Let's do here track 1. That's nice. Path less traveled number 2. Here it is. This already looks great. So this is I'm already thinking this could be where my camera is. There could be a little character on there, so I can already see that working fine. So then ecologies, grab one, pick one from Britain. You let me know. You want to see Britain? 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6 even. Or we see wildflowers. Ooh, how about that? Just grasslands. Just grasslands with trees. Tropics we've looked at, that might get a little bit dense. There's also woodland. Woodland might be nice. Woodland, oh, that. How about that? This looks nice. Woodland 5. I'm going to pick that one. I'm going to totally pick that one. Sweet. Coupons in that email. I like it. Who doesn't like a good coupon? So we'll render this one out, and then we'll hop into Photoshop, and I'll show you a couple of tricks on how to make these things look their best. Okay, so on the classic content, once again, we don't really see that much of the tree. So we've got aspens and aspens young. Let's have a look at the large aspen. Yes, that's just that's just too many aspens already there. So we go slightly closer on the trail. So the generator, old and new, they avoid placing trees on the water or on trail. So that's an important thing for them not to do. Let me go and put a camera in here. We call that path cam. Oops, it should have gone in the label here, not in the name. Name is what Daz Studio knows under the hood, whereas label is what we mere mortals see here. Under render settings, I should really change these to something else. Let's do a 2K render maybe. Path cam. Low shot's good. Bit of negative space here, so that should give us a bit of a clear space here and a bit of a grassy space here. So I'm thinking I'm liking that. And while we're in the render settings, let's swap out that HDRI immediately. And use the one maybe Rosendal Plains. Actually Victoria Sunset. Let's see what that looks like. So we should see a bit of sky features in the background here. Dome on to make sure that actually comes out. And you can also, while we're talking about this, you can also, oh, that's interesting. We probably want to go and see less houses there. Oops, that's ground. I didn't mean that. Dome Y orientation. Let's make sure we just see, something like that in the background. Just some incidental stuff. We'll see what that looks like. So that integrates sort of with the picture here. I think what might make that look more dramatic is if we go and turn the camera Dutch a little bit, that if you hover over this one, it tells you that if you go Control and the right mouse button with your camera selected, it goes like this. So we call that a Dutch angle, and that sometimes makes things more dramatic, because otherwise you see these parallel trees going parallel to the picture's edge, and that just looks a little, you know, not so good. So don't overdo it, of course, but it might just make it kind of nice. And also perhaps on camera, let's see if we make that 38, sort of wide shot. Now we're maybe a little too Dutch, so let's go and do something like this and see what that looks like. Whoops, that's obviously interpreted something that I didn't mean to do to my camera. Hello? Can we go back to the previous thing? Oh, that is actually the back view. Sorry, it's dang. So there. This is going to be called Stream Britain 3. And we'll see what that looks like. Trees were so an hour ago, man. Do we need anything else? We've got the HDRI. We've got we could change the render settings to the what's it called? Spectral rendering. We could do that. And I just see what it looks like. Quite funky to think that all this is governed by essentially a really elaborate random number generator. Oh, clever. If you wait more than a couple of days, that's when all the good deals have gone, though. Not to say that they don't come back, but I've had deals where I've had it both ways. I've had it where I had items in my cart, didn't check out, and the next day things were cheaper. I thought, oh, I wonder what happens if I wait a little bit longer, and then they went like 5 times the price. Look at that. This is insane. Look at the amount of leaves and ground cover. Woohoo! This is nice already. And look, this here is part of the HDRI. So this is not actually something, those aren't trees that we've rendered, but that's part of the HDRI. This looks great. I'm looking forward to this coming out already. Look at the birch trees, how realistic they look. It's crazy. Let this cook. And I think the colors are also nice. So I don't think I want to make that brighter. I could enhance that in Photoshop. I don't think I want to see more light, because that would easily make areas like this blow out. And once detail is gone, you can't really bring it back. Wow. Woohoo! Does it, art? How exciting. It does need a horse. Or a Land Rover, either way, yes. And a few sheep. Yeah, just that one sheep trotting down the path. Yeah, we'll let this render out, and then we'll bring it into Photoshop and see what that looks like. In fact, while this is rendering out, let's take a quick look at just something that we've made earlier. So on our desktop, under Stream Renders, there we go. We've got these two, Test 1 and Test 2. I'm thinking maybe Test 2 with the clouds in the background. Let's see how we can make that. Look at that. That's pretty spectacular. That is pretty cool already. But we can make it even cooler. So 3 tricks I want to show you. And it's fine if you don't quite agree with the colors. We can always change that, put other lookup tables on there and stuff. But what makes any sort of landscape usually better is if the sky is a little darker than the bottom bit here. So we can achieve that in two ways. One thing that makes pictures in general look a little bit better is if we have somewhat of a vignette on the outsides. So the easiest way to do that, aside from single click options, if you wanted to do it completely manual, is to use a square selection in Photoshop, use a new layer, brand new layer, and I'll use the square selection. You can also use the elliptical marquee tool. That both of these things will work fine, and just drag out something like this, and we'll just make the outside dark. So if I go and invert that selection and then use my paint bucket tool here and use the paint bucket option rather than the gradient tool, I can go with the black and white option selected here. I'll go and flood fill everything in the outside here. Hit Control D so that I don't see anything on the outside anymore. And then I'll go and turn this object here into a smart object. Right clicking not on the thumbnail but on this thing that has, you know, words written all over that. So convert to smart object, because that means if I go and head over to filter, blur, and apply some Gaussian blur, I can go and change my mind later, which is important for me. So non-destructive editing. Without that, Gaussian blur would be applied to this border permanently, and that might not be what I want. So 100 might be good, 200 might be too much, but again, I can change my mind later. So if I go and double click on Gaussian blur and I'm thinking, well, maybe 150 would have been better, well, we'll do that. And then we have something, a bit of a vignette here. It might be too strong, but that's fine. We can just go and blend in that opacity here to about maybe like 40%. And then we already have something that looks sort of nicer than the plain picture. You can do this with the tone mapper inside Daz Studio, but if you do it in the post, you have the option to change your mind. So if I'm thinking I would like to have the vignette blurred more or less, like say change that to 100, then I have a bit of a stronger vignette. And as you make that smaller, always good to look at your work as a thumbnail and see, does it still work or not? Because sometimes things work as a thumbnail. Oh, sorry, sometimes things work as a large picture that don't work as a thumbnail, and vice versa. So maybe that edge was a little bit too harsh. I'm going to go back to 150 here because I think that's better. Another option that we have, and you can use these things in conjunction. I'll take this off again so that we have it. I'll call this one vignette. Another option that you have is something similar with a gradient, and that's usually something that photographers use in camera when they shoot. They make sure that they have a gradient applied sort of here, that anything that is sky is less exposed than the rest of the landscape, and that just gives it a much nicer look. Because if we were to put just some basic color correction on here, and you wanted the meadow to be a little bit brighter, let's say just as a random example like this, you see that the clouds start to clip, and it would be much nicer if they weren't doing that. And that's usually because the first third or 20-30% or something at the top here just gets more exposure because the sky's brighter than the stuff that you're photographing, literally. So the way to do that is, with or without the color correction applied, is to use an empty layer and then also use the paint bucket tool, but hold that clicked and just go onto your gradient tool here. And that will now let you pick a gradient. So left click and drag, something like that. So it's very similar to the vignette. If you hold shift, it goes and constrains you to certain parts here. So if you just do this, then we've got ourselves a gradient. This is where you can pick the gradient if you wanted something other than black and white, but black and white works fine here because once again I can drop down the opacity, so how much it actually does, how much it affects my render, and now it looks like that. So again, this might still be a little bit strong, but you get the idea. And these gradients also can be changed retroactively. So now if the sky was brighter, I'll go and put the color correction on the bottom here. It doesn't have that big an effect on the sky anymore. So something to think about before and after. Little gradient on the sky. It's an old photography trick. This was probably a little bit much here. as was this. And you can use that in combination with the vignette, of course. But then something else that I find quite exciting. The raw filter has a vignette option. Good to know, good to know. So you can there's like, not everyone has Photoshop. So if you have Affinity, or if you have Eclipse Studio Paint, or maybe even PaintShop Pro or Krita or GIMP, they all have the same sort of functionality. So if you're ever in this situation that you need to build this from scratch, they all have these options. So yeah. Something else that I wanted to show you is a similar thing to what we have here. That is how to make the outside, and you can just see it when you zoom in, how to make the outside a little bit blurred. So this is sort of, this goes into this realm of artificial depth of field. How would you do that? And this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like without that. So this is now just with the vignette, and it still looks okay, but there's something that cameras usually do when you shoot something at a completely open aperture. They do this, that they introduce a little bit of blurriness on the outside, and it's just because the lens is better on the inside than it is on the outside. And if you shoot with an aperture that's smaller, you need to expose your image more, but also crops out some of the mistakes that can quite naturally happen on the outside of a lens. It's the reason why expensive lenses are as expensive as they are, because they are treated in a way that the outsides are still look good. Because often you can see things like chromatic aberrations on the outside, and this always happens when you shoot at a very open aperture. And to emulate this effect, we can use somewhat of an extension of this effect. And I'll just make all of this invisible again, so that we're just focusing on that. I'll go and make a duplicate of my layer, Alt left click and drag. And I'm going to turn this top layer here into a smart object so that I can go and blur it out. So this is going to be the layer that will have the blurriness. And we have to do this on the whole object. So under filter, once again, blur, Gaussian blur works the best, but this might be a little strong because we don't see the picture anymore. But something like 10, or 10 is even, that's even too strong, maybe like 5. Imagine this is the blurriness that we want to introduce or blend in on the outsides of our image. Let's do that. So this image is blurred, but my layer on the bottom is still in focus. So we can now go and either put on a mask and just paint out these areas on the outside, or we do this again a bit like we did with the vignette, and just use the contents of the vignette and paste that essentially into the mask of this layer, if that makes sense. It sounds incredibly complicated. It is actually just a few clicks, but it's one of those things. You want to put something into the mask, and I'll show you the easy way and the hard way of doing that. First, I'm going to go and put a mask on my layer like that. And that hasn't done anything because the mask is white. So white means whatever's on the bottom layer shines through. White means whatever's on the bottom layer gets occluded, and black means whatever's on the bottom layer gets shown. So I can either paint this whole area in with black, or I can turn this, in fact, into a black mask by just inverting that, and then going with a brush and just painting with white on the outsides, like this. Sorry, now I'm painting with white. And you can do it that way. And if you were to paint with a soft brush, this would look even better. It currently doesn't, so soft round, let me just go do that. And also if you paint with a pen rather than a mouse, this is going to look nicer. So this is that, and it might appear too much now, but again, you can click on the main layer and go and drop the opacity of that layer down. So once again, 0 means the layer isn't shown at all, but just drop it into maybe a few percent, like 20, 30, 40%, and then you add a little bit of blurriness to the outside of the picture. And you can do that with all kinds of techniques. So you can paint it, but you can of course also just use this this mask that we've made here, the vignette, and just paint that content into the outside. And that just, you know, together with all kinds of other things, really gives your image a very, very special touch. So now that we've put everything in, it might look a little bit too dark, but that's where you can then apply all kinds of other adjustment layers to it. So maybe make that a bit brighter, and also make that let's use a bit of color balance. If you want to do it all completely from scratch, you can do that. And perhaps now the trees are just a little bit too poppy. We can go and use the vibrance filter and take the saturation down a little bit, or, you know, crank it up if you really fancy that sort of look. Turn the vibrance down, take the vibrance up, turn the saturation down, and, you know, do all kinds of exciting things. There's secondary color correction as well. If you think, hey, that sky looks great, but I wish it you know, it would look a little bit more blue rather than got this blue-green thing going there, that would be something like, is it a color lookup? No, it's not a color lookup, but then color lookup is also cool. This, you can use an effect like that on top of your image. So this is the classic lookup table. So you have one-click solutions for that as well. If you just want to experiment with what sort of look should my image have. So very cool stuff. That's not what I meant actually, but, you know, that Photoshop has that as well. So the Adobe aren't all bad, to be brutally honest, but they have had quite a bit of reputation in the press for all the wrong reasons. Was it selective color? I think that's what it is. Yeah, so selective color. The color I'm looking for is between cyan and blue. So let me go and pick the cyans, and then just in the cyans, let me go and make that either less cyan like this, or more cyan like that, or just the cyans, make that less yellow, and then that beautiful blue comes out on the sky. And you can do that with other colors as well. If you're thinking, hey, that green, I would like that green to be, I don't know, a little bit less yellow, just the green, you can go and have a look at the greens or the yellows, probably both of them, but just the greens. And then in the greens, you might want to go and increase or decrease the yellow a little bit. And if greens don't work, let's have a look at yellow. So this probably has more yellow than it does have green. So if you turn the yellow down in the yellows, then you're left with all the other colors. So maybe you want to add a bit more anti-magenta to it, which will make things, you know, more green, or maybe even make it bluer. So you can do all kinds of exciting effects. And then of course you can apply masks to this and see what, if you want to only affect a partial area there. So very, very cool stuff. So I like that. I like fiddling around with these things and you know, taking it to the next level. If these were our corrections here, then we can show the before and after. So these are all these are technically also corrections here. I'll call this one blur corrections here. And if we switch those two off, this is what the image looked like before, and this is what it looks like after. So there's a noticeable difference between just adding these few touches. You can go to town and literally go and paint more clouds and paint less clouds in. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do to make these images your own, you know. So funny. Let's see what this render has come out as and how we can make it look better. So this is here forest, right? We're going to call that forest. And let's do the whole thing again, because I think post-production is just such an important part of getting the picture done. Look at that. That looks pretty cool, doesn't it? As is. Very nice. Maybe we can make it look even cooler. Let's make a duplicate first, I'm thinking. And maybe we'll go and do just a little bit of color correction on this first. Just a bit of brightness and contrast. We can tell Photoshop to do this automatically. Usually gets it completely wrong, and you think, thanks Photoshop, that's awesome. But if you think the tendency is there, but it was a very complex calculation of what it just did there, you can go over to edit, and then sometimes you can have a fade option here. So this doesn't work on this because you already have options here. But if we didn't have that, if you didn't use adjustment layers and you just go to something like this, you say edit and then image, and then you make adjustments this way. So auto tone, auto color, auto contrast. So tone does this, and you think, Photoshop, that's bad because you've overdone it. How do we do this? How can we go back? You can either go and make a duplicate of the layer like I did and then just blend in the opacity a little bit. That means you can blend between these two layers. But imagine you hadn't done that and you had forgotten, and clever you has stayed in bed. You can go over to edit, and then there's a fade option here. Usually, not today though, but sometimes there is, and that's literally a value that you can use to blend between the current state and the previous state. Yeah, so I don't think I like what Photoshop has done here, so I'm gonna go and do that again. And I think I'm gonna go and apply some of our corrections to it that we've just learned here. So I think I might go and use my my vignette trick as well as a bit of color correction too. What do you think? That popped, right? And I think it's also because we've let it cook for so long. I think the only thing I want to go and brush in is maybe this part here. I think I might make that a little darker, but that's only in the final image. Yeah, that's just something that is a bit bright, but it's sort of nice because that's when my image, when my eyes sort of get drawn to. So this image, let's start with some color correction, and there's other ways to do that, but I like just making it perhaps a little brighter and then a little harder in contrast. I think that's already super cool. I do like the yellowness of it, so I would want to retain that for sure, and I might I like just using color balance for that. And you have an option to change midtones, shadows, or highlights. So in this case, if you find that the dark portions of the image look not to your liking, you can just go to shadows and you could go and make that more or less yellow. So if you think there's yellow or green in here, you can just go and make that, correct that a little bit, and it'll do this sort of at the bottom of the curve, so all the dark areas, but it also encroaches into the mid areas, but not so much the highlights. So if you do it too much, you can see that this is what's happening. So you don't want to overdo it, but this is what it was before, and maybe we just want to go and correct that out. Preserve luminosity. If you don't do that, then the luminosity of the image retains. If you do it too much, you can see that the gray here also gets that blue, and you don't want to have that. If you do too much, even things like the white on the birch trees here get it. So we don't want to do that. Usually, preserve luminosity is nice. So a little bit like that, and that. I think on my midtones here, I do like the orangey color here. I might just go and enhance that a little bit to do that. And this isn't even secondary color correction, so it would be easy if you go and think, yeah, I like that color tone, but I want to emphasize that. If you go to hue saturation, never do that. Don't ever play with a hue, because that changes the whole color spectrum of the entire image. It's essentially, if you think of color like a circle, like blue goes this way, yellow goes the other way, magenta goes that way, green goes that way, and so forth. So all colors in the circle. What hue does is literally twist the whole circle. So it doesn't just change the blues further to green or magenta. It will do that, but it will also change all the other colors. So never do that. Hue is never a good way of doing color corrections unless you're correcting a mistake. So if you like this, it's this color looks nice, but it's also screwed up other things. So I strongly advise not doing that. So hue is bad. Saturation in this is fine. You can go and crank that up here, but I prefer to use the other one, the vibrance node for that. And then if you wanted to get rid of the yellow in the bottom here, I would always do that in the with this sort of color correction, and then you can go and change just the midtones or just the highlights or just the shadows to your liking. Yeah, so careful with hue. I might go and delete that. So with vignette, is that good if we make it a bit bright? Yeah, okay. So then vignette. Again, let's go put that on the bottom of the stack here. Let's use the ellipse. Vignette is also good. The circular vignettes are good if you had a character and you want to really emphasize them rather than anything else. Maybe you want a vignette sort of like here, rather than over the whole image. So usually it's a nice way to direct the viewer's attention to a particular part of the image. So sometimes you can use it for the eyes if you want to direct attention. Maybe we want to do this. Maybe there's a figure walking here. So G with the paint bucket icon, and then invert. So this is why I like doing manual vignettes, because it doesn't restrict me to where I want this effect to be applied. Gaussian blur, so we're gonna maybe have it 150, something like that. That's nice, and then we can go and just make it really, really subtle. So then if you do that, there's no question as to what's the important part of the image, like before and after. It's almost like when it's not there, it's like there's something missing, and it's just a subtle way. Maybe it's still a bit too strong, but it's a nice subtle way to tell the viewer this is where we're looking. So if it's a promo for a particular item or something, you could say this is important, not the tree, not this area, it's this where the light is. And this is sort of an option to, you know, subtly direct the viewer to that. And every time you do that, you then sometimes have to go and increase the brightness or contrast of the image to compensate for what's happened to the other parts there. So quite exciting. Hue for alien scenes, yes, absolutely. That can happen. And you can go and do this in conjunction with the out of focus thing. Let's try to do that. See if I can remember that from memory. So Alt left click to duplicate that layer, and then make a smart object out of this and add. I might go and take the vignette away just so that we can see only that. We do blur, and this, whoops, no, sorry. Gaussian blur was I was looking for. Blur, Gaussian blur, there we go. And then maybe that's also too strong. We said 5. Was it 5? Might even be too strong still. But let's use 5 because we can change our mind later. So that's now blurred the whole layer. So what I want to do, I'll go get out of the way so we can all see the layer stack. What I want to do is put this image content onto the mask of this layer. So I'll duplicate this mask that I've done here, or maybe even make a new one. Let me go make a new one, because I think I don't want that to be everywhere. No, I do. Let me just go and copy this one. That's cool. So Alt left click and drag. And because it has all these effects now, let me go right click on here and pick rasterize layer. So that will get rid of the smart object and just leave me with this image content here, which is just the black and white circle. So with that circle selected, and it's difficult to see because we now see images and all that, but it's just, you know, this thing, I'm going to crank up the opacity so just we can just see that, and no corrections here either. I'm going to go and hit Control A and Control V so that I copy this whole thing, and then I go back into my blurry layer. So I'll go and go onto this, get rid of the selection, make a mask here. Oh, mask is white. And now if I wanted to go and edit the mask, I can go and click Control and the mask, I think. Nope, sorry, that's not what I meant. It's Alt and click the mask, and then I'll see just the mask. And so I can now go and paste things into the mask. And in my case, that's the black and white image that I've just had there. So paste that in. Paste that in. It totally doesn't work. What a shame. Okay, let me go and do that again here. From this, Control A, Control C, go Alt this thing and paste. There we go. Now this content is in the mask here. And it hasn't destroyed our image. It just means that I have to go and select this thumbnail here to go back to this. And that's not really what I had bargained for, because now I just see this thing here. So it's not really what I want. On the mask, I can go and invert that. So I want it the other way around. I want black on the outside and white on the inside. And now I go and make my bottom layer visible again. So that means I have the sharp image shining through. And if I go and click my image here again, it looks like it's just too much. So this takes away. And if I go and apply that little bit of opacity here, then that means I just blend in some of that out of focusness on the outside here. That's how we do that. If I go and add my vignette back, then you see that this is again, this is another trick to say, hey, this is important. So it emphasizes where you want to look. And I really like that trick. There we go. Eyes up here, yes indeed. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you, but I think, this is kind of, it just shows like how you can go from the plain image that we've had there to something that really just pops. Let me just go and open that image again here, forest, so that we can see. Oh man, I've been meaning to say load it into a different tab. Why don't we do that? Duplicate that into, oh come on, duplicate layer, there we go. Duplicate layer into new document, there we go. So then we can go and change between this and that. And that, so then we can go and see before and after. So exciting stuff what you can do with this. And I think the same applies to what we've made here. Duplicate layer into new document. And then we can have before and after. So kind of cool, the stuff you can make, and yeah, have fun with this. UltraScenery 2, very, very cool. I didn't know how exciting it's going to be when I started playing it, but I've since learned that it's actually quite exciting. So there we go. Thank you so much, Jeff. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. And if you do have any questions, go and ask me. Ask me now. Ask me later. Next stream, I'm thinking we should go and do something with Plant Factory. The Fugazi knows much more about it than I do, because he's been working with it for a while. And Plant Factory has been recently made free together with Vue. And it allows you to create your own foliage bits and pieces. So that might be kind of cool to see how that works. I know little about it, but Fugazi does. And if we invite him and if we ask nicely, maybe he'll go and join us. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I hope I will see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Where's the titles button? Here it is.